All right, everybody, we are drinking the second Pico beer that I made. The first one, there is another video on that. That is they're half squeezed. You know, before we get into this, joining me is Michael Dawson.
Hello.
And Chip.
Howdy.
Thanks for, let's do cheers, fellas.
Cheers.
Thank you for
Pico 2.
coming over. Pico take 2. So, the Pico people saw my first video in which I had a somewhat negative reaction to the beer that resulted. And they asked me if I would be interested in talking to somebody from Pico. I also had some questions about how the system worked. And they said, would you be interested? I said, yes, I would. And they put me in touch with 2013 Homebrewer of the Year, Annie Johnson. She is a Pico employee. She's one of their, I assume, kind of like head tech lead recipe development people. And we had a very nice talk. She gave me a lot of information that some of the things that I was wondering about on camera, and I'm just going to go through some of this stuff. I was wondering how the mash works, and if you want to see my video of the footage of me using the system, you're going to have to go watch the other video. There's not going to be any of that in this video. But the water goes into the mash, it goes out through the bottom, and then it recirculates through the keg. And then somehow there's steam heat that is being generated by the system, and that's how the heat is produced, and it's recirculating through the mash. The hops I was wondering about, they are in a separate compartment from the grains, and there was 4 compartments. What happens is the wort goes through the first one, and then I didn't look at it more carefully, but there's 4 holes too, but it fills, there's levels of, so it'll fill up to one, and then it'll start spilling over into the next one. And that's kind of all timed. That's interesting too.
They have a time
Yeah,
to fill
it's
and
sort of-
spill at certain
I guess.
increments.
Yep. Another thing is when you do put in your zip code and you get it online, it uses that information to figure out your elevation, in which is then they use that to figure out what temperature the boil process should be at. So that was kind of an interesting tidbit. Another tidbit was they actually put minerals into the grains, and that's why when you're starting with distilled water, which is neutral, they build the mineral profile for the specific beer that you are making. So they do all this testing. They'll do these kits, and they'll do one with whatever addition of hops and grains and minerals, and then they'll modify it until they get it exactly how they want. What else was interesting? If you do some of the kits, you can adjust the alcohol and the bitterness, and I was curious about that. So she didn't go with the details, but if you do the alcohol, it adjusts the mash schedule. If you do the bitterness, it does a longer, I think, boil process or something, just to dial up the IBUs. She said maybe you can get 5 more IBUs. Something like that. I asked her if she thought that certain types of beer did better than others, and she did think that darker beers did better. And I told her about my experience with the half squeeze. She wasn't. She believes that it is harder to do a nice hoppy, fresh, bitter tasting beer on that system. There is no actual boil process. It's just heating everything up very hot. The hops are not boiled in a boiling wort, which is what you would normally do on the homebrew level. So I think that could be a challenge for trying to make the best, pale ale or bitter type beer. The yeast question we had was, if you're pitching a whole packet of dried yeast for about a quarter of an amount of beer, that's way too much yeast. And she agreed, and she said that they might even put in the instructions to just do a teaspoon of the packet, and that would be enough, and you're probably actually going to get a better result than if you overpitch, which could be one of the reasons that the half squeeze didn't turn out that well. But they always have the challenge of keeping things as simple as possible and not trying to overcomplicate them, because a lot of the people that are using these things are not experienced brewers. So they're trying to figure out this balance of how much detail, how much should we request these users to do versus how easy do we want it to be for them. And the last thing I'll mention is, in general, overall, the goal of the Pico program is to make commercially cloned beers, like the ones that we've done. They also just have Pico original recipe ones, but they're wanting to get away from that. They want to focus on just more like, you want this kind of beer that you can't get in your country, or even in your part of the country, or even in your country at all. You can buy this kit, you can make it, and you can generate that kind of a beer. That's their overall drive, and
that makes
I thought that was interesting also.
Yeah, because then you kind of you're not really out for the creativity. You're out for connectivity or comparability, I guess would be.
They like working with the breweries. Yeah. They like developing the recipes with the breweries, having them test it, getting it dialed in so it's just right. That's something that they get the impression that they like doing until they get the result that they want. Speaking of results, what do we think of this beer as compared to before Chips finishes? We gotta talk about it for a minute. But what do you guys think of this beer? And you all did drink the half squeeze, and you can check out that video if you want. How does the Stout compare?
It's definitely more enjoyable just initially. It's got a lot of chocolate, it's got a lot of coffee. It's got Cascade and Centennial listed. I personally feel like I get a little punch of that along with the roastiness.
Cascade and Centennial grains, crystal, Munich, chocolate, roasted barley, flaked oats. This is Elysian Dragonstooth Stout, a full, rich, full-bodied, complex Imperial Oatmeal Stout, multiple medal winning stout from Elysian. It was supposed to be 8.1%. Mine is 7.4, so pretty close. Mine was 1075 down to 1019. And I did not pitch the entire yeast packet. I didn't do a measured amount. I just knew that it seemed excessive, so I'm guessing maybe I pitched like 70 to 80% of it. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say I agree with Chip. It's way more enjoyable to drink compared to the IPA. It's got obviously a lot of really strong native flavors. So if there were any fermentation issues, you kind of can't taste them past all the chocolate malt and roasted barley and oats and hops in this thing. It's just really chocolatey. It's espresso-like. It's bitter, but it's kind of bittersweet too. It's got a lot of texture due to the oats and the terminal gravity. It's a nice beer.
I think it smells. When I smell it, I think it smells kind of sweet. I think I might be drinking a sweet stout, a milk stout, or smelling. But you do get, like you say, the coffee, the dark chocolate. It's not overly acrid in the way that you can get, and sometimes it's enjoyable, but sometimes a stout or a porter can have a lot of just kind of bitterness from the roasted grains, not from hops. This overall has a little bit of that, which you want, at least something, but it's I think overall I think of it as kind of a sweet drinking beer. You guys were commenting on the hops. It's supposed to have 56 IBUs in 1075 beer. I mean, that's not overly, you can have that many IBUs.
I get it, especially in the finish. Like, it finishes with a bitterness.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, it smells sweet up front. It tastes a mixture of sweet and bitter to me, and then it finishes very...
It's got a very long, bitter finish.
And that's probably the roast and the hops, not just hops.
Maybe some alcohol in there, too.
A little bit.
So I think if somebody was buying this system to make a beer at home and the person was not that experienced of a brewer, but they could follow the instructions, I think they would be pretty happy with a beer like this. Other just non-sort of fresh, hoppy, clean beers, I think would probably do better. I mean, based on my...
There's a reason everybody brews an American brown ale for their first homebrew. I mean,
right.
there's
forgiving.
It's forgiving. There's space to kind of play, and there's less of an expectation than with something that just even has the word IPA on it. Now you've got a certain expectation to get met, and I just pros are pros for a reason. It's difficult to mimic that.
So I have one custom pack that I
What are
can.
you gonna do?
I don't know. I choose, I think, what I want in it. I don't know how granular the choices are as far as how much of each grain, or I'm not percentages of grain or hops, but I will do at least one more for sure pack. Maybe I can do some other testing if there's some other packs that come my way, but I'm much happier with this.
Hey
And
Joe,
it
hook
sounds
us
like-
up, man.
Sounds like we all are.
Well, let me ask just real quick on your custom pack. Do you think you'll do a recipe that you've done a lot throughout your many years of brewing, or will you do something that just sounds good? You seem the kind of guy that's going to do something you've brewed maybe 4 or 5
Well, I
times.
might also consider if I have some yeast at my house that I could dump some of my own, washed yeast into it instead of using whatever they might send. And if it was longer time of year, even though it wouldn't be calendar time, maybe I would do an Oktoberfest, something with some malt character, but or not Doppelbock, but I don't know, maybe something like that.
You crazy, Don.
You crazy, man. Off the grid, down. Oh.
Anyway, guys, a lot of you watched the first Pico video. I had a couple of my friends that said, I watched the whole Pico video of yours. My brother-in-law, he's like, I usually don't watch your video. I watch it for a minute. I'm like, yeah, I see what it is. It's just not for me. But I had a couple friends and family that watched the whole thing. So, I don't know. People must be interested in the device and in technology. So, much happier with this result. I guess, I would be more likely to, recommend the system if you were a novice who was interested in getting into brewing and you wanted to try it based on this than based on the previous one. So, thanks for joining in. We got a couple more beers to sample.
Shout out to Andy Johnson.
Catch you later.